good afternoon or good morning to those of you on the West Coast and beyond. This is Randy Wilson at Jobs of the Future with Dudney Silla, and welcome to our last webinar of the year for the TAACCCT evaluation. This webinar is on evaluating partnerships, local and national perspectives. Before we move on, I'm going to turn things over to Dudney. He's going to explain the technical aspects of the webinar. Dudney?
Hello, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us here. Dudney Silla at Jobs for the Future. We're excited to host all of you today. A quick overview of some of the tech. Please mute your phones upon entry. This will help us to limit any background noise as the presenters speak today. The webinar is being recorded, so we will be able to have access to it via SharePoint and be able to reference it down the road. And if you need any WebEx technical support, the number is 1-866-229-3239 if you're having any issues entering into the webinar or run into any technical issues. If you have any questions, you can also utilize the chat box, which can be found in the bottom right of your screen. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to input any questions you have based on what the speakers present today. Include all of those questions in the chat box, and we will reference those when we get to the end question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dudney. So why focus on the evaluation of partnerships? We chose this topic because it's central to the TAACCCT model, but it's also essential in making workforce educational programs successful. That's why TAACCCT is not only about education and labor market outcomes, but about changing systems and building the capacity of community colleges. So partnerships with employers, with the workforce system, with community-based organizations, and other post-secondary institutions are central, we think, to achieving good labor market outcomes. But why is that, and how do we know? The models and methods of analyzing the impact of workforce programs are better known and more standardized than ones for analyzing partnerships. For that reason, we put together a group with deep expertise and creativity in evaluating partnerships. We're going to start at a high level with John Trutko, a member of the TAACCCT National Evaluation Team led by the Urban Institute. John Trutko will give us a conceptual framework for defining and analyzing partnerships and some tools derived from current and former work with community college-based programs. Next, Deborah Bragg, Director of the Office of Community College Research and Leadership, will bring us down to the local level and discuss how her team is evaluating one kind of partnership, the college's engagement with employers in the TAACCCT program. And then finally, Maggie Cosgrove with John Cosgrove, evaluators who designed the partnership evaluation tool used by Dr. Bragg's team, will talk about what they learned about employer engagement in their work and how they work with TAACCCT grantees to apply these learnings to program improvement. After the presentations, we'll open up the lines for question and discussion. So please take it away, John Trutko.
Provide some background first on partnerships and coordination based on some research that we've done in the past, then discuss general approaches to evaluation of partnerships, and conclude by providing an overview of the planned national evaluation of TAACCCT partnerships through what we're planning to have as internet surveys and site visits. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to provide some general background on coordination partnerships. I'm going to be using those terms somewhat interchangeably in this discussion. The term coordination or partnering refers to situations where two or more organizations work together, partner, through formal or informal arrangements. Sometimes these arrangements are formalized in contracts or memoranda of understanding. Other terms sometimes used for coordination partnerships are collaboration, linkages, and service integration or program integration. Coordination in partners is aimed at usually about three things: improving program effectiveness, reducing program cost or improving cost effectiveness, and avoiding unnecessarily duplication of services. Partnerships can vary in their complexity. The simplest form of partnership is sharing of information by two or more organizations or programs. Other forms of partnership include joint planning, coordinated referrals, and coordinated provision of services. The most complete form of coordination is program integration, where two or more programs merge their funding, jointly conduct outreach, assessment, service provision, placement, and other services. Now, turning to evaluating partnerships. The first point I'd like to make is to emphasize that evaluation of partnerships is often complex, not easily quantified, typically based on qualitative assessments from varying perspectives. It's critical to obtain input from all partners, as partners may have very different perspectives on how well the partnership is going, and it's important to gain perspectives at varying levels within each partner, including administrators, supervisors, and staff. Often you hear very different views at different levels, and discussions with staff can provide details and assessments of specific activities and services that are coordinated. The most common approach to evaluation of partnerships is process, or what we call implementation evaluation. Data collection methods include site visits featuring in-depth interviews with program administrators and staff, and partner staff and leadership, including for TAACCCT grants employers. This includes review of contracts and memorandum of understanding between partners, which often detail the proposed role of each organization within the partnership. Also, sometimes in the past we've used telephone interviews with in-depth interviews of program administrators and staff, and also surveys via the internet increasingly and mail. I'm going to talk a bit about these approaches and our plans for the TAACCCT evaluation in a few minutes. Okay, some key areas of focus for such evaluation or implementation studies when you're looking at coordination are why the partnerships were formed, how partnerships got started and have evolved over time, challenges in initiating and sustaining partnerships. Sometimes, for example, there can be turf battles along the way, challenges to sharing participant data or other bureaucratic challenges that need to be overcome. Types of organizations involved in partnerships, both within TAACCCT grantees and externally when we look at the TAACCCT grants. Nature and intensity of partnerships, including types of services and activities conducted by partners. Advantages, benefits of coordinating, disadvantage and costs of partnering, and whether partnerships will be sustained in the future. Some potential advantages to partnering that may be identified by evaluators, and what we often see and look for among them are access to additional resources, additional public or private funding, greater flexibility in using funds, ability to offer a wider range of services, increased knowledge, communication among agency staff, enhanced ability to place participants through other agencies at little or no additional cost, better tracking of services received by clients, and of participant outcomes such as job placement, earnings, educational outcomes, enhanced ability to serve mandated targeted groups, improved image with clients, employers, and community, specialization in areas of expertise, enhanced performance outcomes, and increased efficiencies and cost savings through elimination of duplicate efforts. Coordination does not come without some cost, however. Potential disadvantages of partnering, which you might look for in conducting evaluations of partnerships, time and effort involved in planning and sustaining coordination, potential loss of autonomy in decision-making, need to resolve interagency conflicts and turf battles, need to maintain new operational procedures, client flows, information systems, and potential inefficiencies of outstationing. Now, I'd like to provide just a quick overview of the National Evaluation Team approach to evaluating TAACCCT partnerships. This slide here shows the National Evaluation Conceptual Framework for assessing partnerships formed under TAACCCT. First, as shown in the slide, there are identified coordination needs. Systems need to be better aligned and connected to more effectively serve students. Key inputs, the core element is strategic alignment featuring involvement of governors, employer and industry, public workforce system, and other organizations. Key outputs, capacity building, which is a key focus of the TAACCCT grants. That is expanding current and building new partnerships that may be internal to the college, across colleges, if in a consortium, and external to the college. Finally, key outcomes, well-connected, efficient systems in the community, region, and sustainable partnerships with employers. We anticipate that the national evaluation will include an online survey of TAACCCT colleges as well as a site visits. The survey will be conducted in the first half of year 4 for all grants. It will involve mostly closed-ended questions about the types of partners, their roles, most important partnerships, and leverage resources. TAACCCT grantees will also be asked to rate perceived effectiveness and sustainability of TAACCCT partnerships. Also, in addition to the internet survey, the National Evaluation Team will conduct site visits to selected TAACCCT grantees, rounds 2 and 3. During these site visits, we plan to conduct interviews with grant directors and staff who will ask questions about the nature of partnerships, including rationale for approaching partners for TAACCCT, previous relationships with partners, how they were engaged, the role of partners over the course of the grant, and perceived effectiveness, success and challenges, and sustainability of the partnerships. Interviews with internal and external partners will also be conducted, including interviews with employers. We'll ask questions about the rationale for becoming a partner, previous relationships with the college, the nature of their involvement in the grant activities, perceived effectiveness of the partnership and grant activities, and plans for continued involvement with the college after the grant ends. Finally, this slide presents several web links that might be useful for local evaluators. We have evaluations of similar Department of Labor grant programs and then other selected evaluations of community college innovations. For example, the first item, the community-based job training grants. This study provides some interesting tables and analyses of partnerships that local evaluators might want to look at, and also the appendix includes an internet survey instrument with sample questions focused on trying to assess partnerships. Now I'd like to turn over to the presentation to Deborah Bragg of the Office of Community College Research and Leadership.
Thank you, John. You've made my job easy a little bit. You've done such a nice job of really sharing that big overview of partnership, kind of involvement potentially in TAACCCT and the evaluation. I'm pleased to be able to present today on behalf of the Office of Community College Research and Leadership team that is conducting third-party evaluations with a couple of national consortium in round 1, and I'll also be sharing some of my experience working as a consultant as a third-party evaluator with John and Maggie Cosgrove in Missouri, who you'll hear from, and our relationship will become a bit clearer and as to why I bring that up now. I also want to say that I do think it's important as you can go on to the next slide. As we think about my presentation, we really do situate employers as one of the critical partners, but not the only critical partner in the TAACCCT grant. So our evaluation questions parallel very closely the questions that John showed you earlier. So who are these partners? What roles do they play in supporting implementation of the TAACCCT-funded programs of study and strategies? What challenges have the various partners faced and overcome? And then we would like to try to get at what difference do partnerships make potentially in the impact of the TAACCCT grants and possibly on student outcomes. And as John has pointed out, that's an extremely complicated endeavor, and I'm not sure how far we'll get, but I'll show you our method. So the next slide presents the multiple methods that we're using. We do consider our evaluation mixed methods evaluation, so we're gathering both qualitative and quantitative data through multiple methods. And you know, there's a lot of information about partnerships that exist in the consortium and in the colleges that we're evaluating. So the proposals, agreements, all that documentation. Conducting telephone interviews can be a very inexpensive and fairly productive way to get a pretty good sense of what a partner is doing. And we conduct those interviews both with the colleges and with their partners, since you know, they're all by definition partners in these relationships. I'll share with you how we're using a data collection tool that gathers a little deeper information about partners over time. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. One thing that we think is extremely important to the whole data collection process is member checking and making sure that we're having a conversation and understanding partnerships accurately as we move on. The slide you see now then gets at this notion of really the longitudinal nature of these TAACCCT evaluations that we're doing. And as someone who's done program evaluation, you know, for many years, we don't always have the opportunity to do longitudinal evaluation. But with TAACCCT, we do. And one of the things that we were able to do with the partner piece is to gather data about how partnerships related to what existed prior to the grant, and then how those partnerships have evolved over time. We use a self-assessment tool that each co-grantee college leader or their team completes prior to our doing a site visit. And that data collection tool asks them to tell us who are the current partners, if those partners are new partners, which is critical because this is a capacity building grant, and we ask them to talk about or rate their roles and explain the partnership. And I'll show you that tool. We collected that data in 2012. We continued to collect the data in 2014 again to compare. And our goal is possibly working with our consortium to collect some additional data possibly in 2015 before the end of the grant. Here you see the self-assessment tool. This is only one part of self-assessment, I would tell you. We also collect data from the co-grantee colleges about their strategy implementation. But this page gets at the partners and the partner roles. So we ask them who their partners are, whether this is a new partner, and we ask them to select the top 3 roles or primary roles that this partner is playing and provide some explanation for that. This data comes from the community colleges, but we use this data then to establish who we will visit when we do site visits. So we get a sense of the breadth of the partnership, the depth of the roles that different partners are playing, and then we work with the colleges to identify who we will visit and do more in-depth interviews when we do get on site, and those are directly with those partners. So it is used in a number of different ways, and you can go to the next slide then. The next slide gives you a very exhaustive list, and this is a drop-down menu in the tool. So the respondent is able to read through this pretty exhaustive list that came both from the literature, our own experience doing evaluation at OCCRL, as well as our conversations with our partners. We were able to develop this list, and they use that then to, you know, as a closed-ended kind of item to indicate what the top 3 partner roles are. So you can go to the next slide. These data will then all become part of the impact studies that we're collecting for our consortium clients. We will have information on the number of partners, the number of new partners, the proximity of those partners to the college and to one another, the types of organizations that are partners. We'll also have this data on primary roles and some qualitative data on challenges. We also had gathered through the one-on-one interviews, the site visits, and some focus groups, qualitative data on the strength of the relationships. You know, how do people talk about this partner, and do they mention this partner as to helping them meet strategic goals? And we also have a very strong interest in how the partners talk about their commitment actually to student success and student outcomes. You know, are they a partner who mainly talks about playing some sort of process role, you know, providing equipment or maybe doing guest lectures or field trips? All those things are great, but does that partner ever mention a knowledge of the students who are enrolled and what student outcomes might look like? And those are qualitative data we're capturing as well through our notes. The next slide then. Because we got so interested in this work through the Office of Community College Research and Leadership and our Transformative Change Initiative grant that's funded by a number of funders, and many of you may know about the Transformative Change Initiative, we partnered with the Aspen Institute to conduct a convening in September to try to learn more about how TAACCCT evaluators are trying to assess partner engagement and employer engagement. And I'm just quickly sharing with you a definition that John Colburn started that meeting with to try to see if we can begin to get some common understanding of what we mean by employer engagement, which can also vastly facilitate evaluation work. So there's information on our website about that, and you can go to the next slide. Our staff at OCCRL created an annotated bibliography on evaluation of employer engagement for that meeting, and this is available on our website. And I'm just giving you a sense. There's 12 sources that are described there, and it covers a breadth of topics related to the evaluation of employer engagement. So those are my comments, and I look forward to hearing what John and Maggie Cosgrove have to say.
Hi, this is Maggie Cosgrove. First of all, I'd like to thank Jobs for the Future for providing this forum. John and I are Cosgrove and Associates, and we are the internal researchers in Missouri's Rounds 1 and 2 TAACCCT grants. Deborah Bragg we're fortunate that Deborah Bragg is our third-party evaluator on this grant. And as we've gotten into evaluating and researching these two grants, one of the things that we saw pretty quickly on is that colleges were adapting and developing as the grant was going on. And so we saw pretty quickly that we were going to need to participate in some development evaluation. So our evaluation has also evolved along the way with this. Another thing that we saw early on is that employer engagement was an area of concern at some of the institutions, and we weren't sure if that was just because they weren't telling us what they were doing or if that was really the reality. So we took Dr. Bragg's tool and we customized it for the institutions in rounds 1 and 2, and we asked them to report back to us on a quarterly basis so we could get a sense of what was going on at every institution with their individual employers. And over time, we saw great variation in not only the level of activity, but how the colleges interpreted what a partner was and how they interpreted some of these activities that Dr. Bragg showed you earlier. So if you could go to the next slide. So this slide is a result. This slide and the next slide are both results of from those quarterly reports where we see what the colleges reported that they were doing. So if you look at this slide, you see that the internships and externships are a big deal in round 1, and that's because it's a healthcare grant and so many of the programs require clinicals. And if you move to the next slide, this is a manufacturing grant. So what the colleges are doing is a little different. It's also a little different because the people in charge of the colleges are a little different in rounds 1 and 2, and also the colleges learned a thing or two between round 1 and round 2. So basically what this slide before and this slide show are the variations in what the colleges have done in terms of employer engagement. If we move on to the next slide, what we saw from the previous two slides and from reading all the reports that the colleges had turned in was there was this great variation, and there was a real need amongst the colleges, not within the consortium, to learn from each other. There was a real opportunity for them to learn. Different colleges were doing different things, and they were doing them some well and some not so well. They had different struggles. So the consortium put together an employment engagement task force, and that task force was quite a variety of people across each institution. Some colleges sent only their leads. Other colleges didn't send their leads, but sent someone that they called a retention specialist or the student support person. Other colleges had actual employment specialists, business specialists, and that's who they sent to the task force. And this was the first time in the state that this group of people got together to share what they were doing. Even though they were working in the same industry, they had never been in the same room together. So this was a real great opportunity for some reflective practice and some appreciative learning to go on. So we actually, in the midst of this employer engagement task force, we were able to go from this sort of monster checklist of all the different sort of activities that colleges could engage in and that they had been engaging in to some degree, to which of those activities were the most beneficial and what those activities actually meant within each institution and how they got the employers to do those things. So we actually gained a lot of additional data. Some of it was because certain colleges aren't, they have report filler routers who aren't engaged, who aren't interested in giving a lot of good detailed information, but a lot of it was just because of the sitting around a table, the task force was able to share some really good information. So the result of the employer engagement task force was a list of best practices, an evolving list, let's say, and from that the task force wrote a white paper and created a model. So if we move on to this next slide right here, what we're talking about in this slide and the next slide are what the colleges came for as the way to sustain employer engagement, how to do it effectively and how to build capacity for employer engagement beyond the TAACCCT grants. So this slide, you can move to the next slide. These are the things that the colleges said that they needed to do in order to make employer engagement work. And as a result of this, we came up with the next slide, which is the model. And this is a graphic interpretation of the steps that the colleges understand that they need to engage in order to have successful employer engagement. And there's relationships between each of these items in the model, and it gives us an ability to interpret and evaluate how the colleges are doing each step, but also between each step, how they're making their way. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie, and thank you, John and Deborah, for excellent and very rich and information-filled presentation. Well, we've seen a number of variations in the process of partnerships, the process of evaluating partnerships, and particularly deep look at evaluating employer engagement. Now we'd like to take some questions from the audience. As you know, we've got a chat box. Will people come online too, or are we just doing chat box? Oh, okay, yeah. So we have a request, and this is for Maggie Cosgrove, to spend a few minutes walking through the model that you just presented.
Okay, sure. If you can put that back up.
I assume this is what we mean, the
I think this is probably
feedback.
What it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So what that is that the employers need to be engaged at every step along the way. And the colleges identified that these were the steps, that if they need to have employers engaged at the very beginning as they're developing the program. And the list of activities that are in that report that Deborah showed you in her slides and I alluded to in the graphic display of the activities that colleges engaged in, of those activities are about program development. How do you get employers engaged in that? And then it moves on to recruitment. Employers are actually involved in recruiting students for programs, either their own workforce or sometimes it's, people outside their workforce who have applied for jobs there. Then there were various and numerous ways with which employers were able to provide programmatic assistance for participants, transportation, books, supplies, all sorts of things along the way there. And then the next step along the model is the employer assistance. And that's when the employers actually come in and they provide adjunct faculty in order to teach the courses. They come in and they do mock interviews. The employers actually come into and become part of the program and help the students succeed along the way there. They do tours of facilities. And then the final loop is, do they actually employ the participants? Do they employ the graduates? And do they keep them after they've employed them? And then based upon those employers that they get, that's where you go back to the feedback. Do they come back and do they say to the college, well, based upon the graduates that we've hired, these are the sorts of things that we're looking for, and this is a way that you could enrich your programs. And this depiction, or this series of steps, allows us to evaluate each step and the relationship among the steps as we look at what the colleges are, how they are engaging with their partners, employers in this instance.
Okay, thank you, Maggie. We're going to take some more questions now, and I think the following question really is directed to either of the Missouri teams of evaluators evaluating Missouri Tech grants. And did you find best practices in how to engage employers? Actually, John Fretko, if you have insights from community-based job training or other initiatives that you evaluate, please feel free to weigh in too. Did you find best practices in engaging employers?
Yes. This is Maggie again. I would say that best practices would be if we would go up to sort of the sustaining effective employer engagement. The two slides right before the model, it looks like slides 30 and 31. And those are sort of the nutshell synopsises of what the colleges pretty much all agreed that this is what they needed to do. They really need to demonstrate that they're listening to the employers by taking action on what the employers had asked for. The other thing that I think on the slide 31, the two that are really important are treating employers as though they're customers, to be really responsive to their needs, and to create a culture of collaboration, not only with your employer partner, but within the college, because we've heard from employers that it's sort of irritating dealing with the bureaucracy of the college. So those colleges that were able to reduce that and create ease of communication between employers and programmatic people at the college, that's where a lot of success was. And colleges said to do that when they did the next one, which was manage the knowledge and not have 7 different departments who are relating to employers, but the colleges that actually had some sort of database of employer partners and actually used it so that they didn't inundate employer partners with requests.
Okay. Deborah or
so
John?
Randy, I'd like to comment. One thing that I would say is I would definitely say that the colleges, the folks that we are working with in the community colleges, as well as their partners, they do share with us what they think are more effective practices. So we know what those are generally. What we don't know yet is what the impact of those partnerships really are in terms of either program impact or student outcomes. And you know, if we take sort of a technical definition of best practices, it's really important to know what are the actual outcomes. So that's one reason when I commented on, from a qualitative perspective, we want to know what the practices are, but we also really kind of want to know what they think those practices are doing for students and the extent to which the partners see a linkage between the processes they're changing and the outcomes that they you know, are seeking as a partner in the grant. And we really do want to try as best we can to get a sense of, you know, who these partners are, the number of partners, the types of roles they play, and see if in programs, when they're linked to programs, then, you know, do we see differences in program or student outcomes? So anyway, to me, some of the question of are there best practices is still yet to come, because these evaluations, you know, we still have another 9 months in round 1, and round 2 and 3 are really just, you know, just perking along here, still trying to implement programs.
Randy, this is John Trucco.
Sure.
I would just add, when we've been out and interviewed people, you know, organizations involved, and they've always said that there's can be a lot of time and energy involved in attending meetings and just being engaged in partnerships, and they can shy away from doing that if they think there's going to be too much time involvement, because, you know, they're more interested in the bottom line, and so I think you have to, you know, take that into consideration and make sure you're not overwhelming your employer partners. And also, I think that you have to look at where they're interested in engaging, and I think that they're interested in influencing the type of curriculum or the type of, say, equipment people are trained on, you know, the students are trained on. And also in on the kind of the back end, either, you know, so if people are coming as, say, interns or, you know, they're going to hire them, they want them well trained and ready to go when they walk in the door. So I think that's what I would, you know, specifically in trying to engage and coordinate with employers, I would emphasize those things.
Okay, thanks. There's another group of questions that concern the process of working for the evaluator to work with the college to attain information about and from employers. And, you know, it's basically, did you receive any resistance from colleges or from the consortium lead in terms of either sharing that information or wanting to serve, the consortium lead wanting to serve as the mediator, the mediating role in bridging you to the employer? Can you comment on that process, attaining information, attaining contact with partners?
Could I just have the clarification? Do you mean trying to engage the employer in the evaluation effort or getting information from them? Is that the?
I think the questions are focused on the evaluator, not on the grantee, as I understand. In other words, what was there any resistance in when you sought help from the grantee, either from the college, to facilitate contact and relationships with the employer?
Well, I could address that in some of the studies that we've had. I think one of the hardest part has been trying to work through grantees to set up interviews with employers or particularly focus groups and trying to get them, you know, trying to get employers to take time from, you know, what they're doing on their jobs to come to attend, you know, interviews and things like that. Now, what we've done sometimes is going to the employer to interview them and talking to them, or also having telephone discussions with them. But, you know, always keeping in mind how much time we're taking. We've never had great success in getting employers together unless they're attending some other event, say, you know, if there's a meeting among the partners, then pulling aside the employer. So I think that is a challenge to get input from employers.
Maggie or Deborah, do you have anything to add on that point?
Yeah, I do agree with John. I do have to say, I think we very much understand the concerns that might emerge because, you know, some of the partners have been new under TAACCCT, so relationships are being built between the colleges and their partners. And so, you know, and as third-party evaluators, we stand outside some of that work and we look into it. And I think addressing in a very, as best you can, what it is you're going to be doing, what data are you collecting, you know, how would you respond if some concerns were raised, you know, and I think those are very legitimate conversations that need to happen before an evaluator goes to a partner site or conducts partner interviews. It makes sense that people will really want to understand what's the value of that data and how will it be used and how will you respond if some questions are asked that pertain to the college or another partner. So I just want to confirm it is a tricky area, and I think it's one that just deserves, you know, the utmost respect from all parties on why that data are useful and needed.
Thank you. Here's a question, shifting back to evaluating the relationship between various partners. How do you reinvigorate college-employer partnerships? What works best to encourage partners to stay involved, and what strategies work best within the college to transform the relationship with partners?
This is Maggie. I would say show them it makes a difference. Use what they say. Back to be responsive. Treat them like a customer.
So it really is a continuation of the things that initiate a good partnership. And
demonstrate in the final end that they're getting a better product, which for the employer is a better graduate of your program. You know, so often we find that the relationships evolve into a real personality, a real singular person relationship between the employer and the college. And while those are great, that's not always sustainable. So one of the things that the college talked about was to try to make it more than a party of one at the college that interacts with the employer partner and also at the employer too.
Okay. What about grantees who don't have partners clearly delineated? Is there anything the employer can do to help facilitate the process? Anyone want to pick up on that?
Just to clarify that question, is it what can the grantee do to facilitate if you don't have a partner, an employer partner now, or is it the other way around from the employer?
No, the question is what can the evaluator do, and it's not the case. It's not always the case. The evaluator is playing that director role, you know, as opposed to an arm's length role. In some ways, this is reminiscent of the kind of internal or developmental role that Cosgrove Associates are playing. Is that correct, Maggie?
Yeah, but I don't see that, you know, we're still researchers and evaluators, so we really, that has not been our role to actually get involved at that level. I think right. That we've worked more along the line is once the relationship is there and we're researching and evaluating it, presenting the information so that the colleges can engage in peer learning from each other, from their own experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, in my past role on evaluations, we haven't really gotten involved in actually promoting the partnerships. We've more documented how they've been. Now, sometimes what there is, there's a technical assistance team that's, that you have on a national evaluation, you'll have a big demonstration program, you have an evaluation team and then a technical assistance team. And the technical assistance team might get involved in that kind of activity and trying to lay out how you'd promote these partnerships and how to expand existing ones. So I think that's where I would look to. I wouldn't necessarily want the evaluators to kind of being, to be helping and then evaluating how well they did.
Okay, so there's an issue of objectivity.
Yeah, I think from an evaluation perspective, you wouldn't want to be evaluating what you're trying to promote. But I think there is help out there. There's certainly a lot of literature which, details the problems that organizations run into in establishing linkages and then maintaining. I think that's a huge problem, maintaining linkages over time, because in the end it has to be meaningful to both parties to continue. So the employer needs to get something out of it and feel, and I think that's also important, is to try to extend beyond that one individual that you may be working with. For example, sometimes there's you might have somebody on the staff that's working on establishing internships, and they'll work with one person, at the organization. So trying to get that wider involvement of the employer is important so you can sustain it after that person leaves.
I have a question for any of you, but in your experience, have you found that employers, or for that matter other partners, reached out and used the findings from the evaluation or data from the evaluation themselves? Did they find benefit in the research results, so that they found some benefit in participating in the evaluation?
Randy, I would share an interesting development that we found in this last round of site visits that we've done at OCCRL. A fairly common statement that an employer partner will make is that we would do more if we were asked and we know what to do. And this is not just one employer. We've seen that in different locations. We've heard that at different times. And I don't know if this has to do with, now extended relationships and people, do see some engagement, but they're not entirely sure what they can do to enhance the program. So as an evaluator, what we have done with that information is to share with them that we will be letting, the college in particular know that there's an interest in additional types of activities or relationships, and that conversation should then flow out of the evaluation, and it's up to them to determine what those roles and responsibilities would be. But that's been an interesting development in this last wave, is employers in particular saying to us, we would do more if we knew what they need us to do.
And is that feedback that you then shared with the grantees?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. That's part of our debrief and part of our reporting, is that, we've heard this, and now what will you do, in response to continue to build that relationship?
Great. Well, that's good to hear.
It is good to hear.
There was a very specific question raised a little while ago concerning the activities in Missouri, and I believe it's predicated on the relationship between the grantee and the workforce system. But the question is, did relations with the WIA office improve?
Maybe I could speak to that, John and Maggie. Just one piece of information that's important is, over the time of the round 1 and round 2 grants, there have been some changes in state policy that have impacted this TAACCCT grant and the roles that the career centers play relative to the grant. So taking into account, and I do think it's important for Maggie to comment as well, from her very important perspective, but it's been an interesting observation that I've made is that I've seen relationships improve and I've seen good relationships diminish over the last 3 years, not just because of what happens in this grant, but because of changes in state policy that impact both the WIA constituents and the TAACCCT constituents.
This is Maggie. I would say that Deb is right on target. No surprise to me. Yeah, there's been a lot of change in state policy that has affected the relationship, but I would say for the most part, in most instances, the relationships have improved as the colleges and the career centers have worked together. That's not universal, but it's for the most part. Another interesting aside is that at several of the colleges, they've ended up hiring previous employees of career centers who lost their jobs due to some of these aforementioned changes. And those employees are proving to be invaluable to the colleges in terms of what they're able to do with not so much employer engagement, but the way that they're able to help the students work through the programs and their experience with this population of the target population for the grant program.
Okay. We've got a question about the relationship of the evaluator to the employer, and that's, are employers generally willing to talk to you all as the evaluator? If they're hesitant, how are you addressing their concerns?
I could respond to that. I think it has depended. In some studies, I feel like that the employers, when you ask you're in kind of a tough spot sometimes to get the employers to talk to. So you work through the grantee because they identify, and sometimes it's kind of like you get a cherry picking of people you talk to. They give you maybe what they feel are their 3 strongest partnerships, or with employers or others, and you don't know if these are really representative, and it's hard to kind of work around that. I mean, one way you can do that is before you say make a visit to a site, you can find out what are their partners, what are their key partnerships, and then you could request specific ones so they're not identifying for you. Now, once I've talked with employers, I think it's varied. It really has as to how frank they want to be with you, and it's one thing you can do is try to talk at different levels of the organization. Sometimes I find there's, if I start, and that can be challenging with an employer because usually you're talking to one, a representative of the employer, but sometimes there's different viewpoints from somebody that's, that actually is involved in that coordination or the partnership, that does the day-to-day versus somebody that's a higher level. So I kind of like to try and get to a level where the actual person that's engaging with the organization is, so that I can get as specific an idea of the particular activities that are being coordinated, say job placement or curriculum development or whatever that is. But it is a challenge. I mean, I think that the only thing I can say is that I think if you get more perspectives and it starts to get clearer, what the assessment is and which partnerships are strong. And I think if you, visited 4 or 5 different employer partners that might be engaged in it, then you may get some diversity of opinion. But that is challenging.
Are there additional data that will be useful to help us discern the effectiveness of employer engagement and the impact of employer partnerships on TAACCCT outcomes.
This is Maggie. I would say the one piece of data that we really wish we could have and have it be 100% accurate is, are the partners employing graduates, to know precisely who they're hiring. And, you know, we have that, but it's sort of self-reported. It's not universally accurate. We have some sense of it, but we don't know exactly for sure. And that would
Any insights on how to get that most effectively?
Well,
do you have a magic lamp?
Go ahead.
No, this is Maggie. I was just saying, do you have a magic lamp? Because that would work, but go ahead. Go ahead, John. You might have a more practical.
Yeah, well, I think that this has always been a problem for us, you know, evaluating, is that, you know, the data is often self-reported, and we collect it in different ways. I mean, what we try and do is look at it at certain times after, you know, somebody exits or from the point in time which they come into the program, and then look at their employment status, and then we can collect data, you know, say it's 6, 12, you know, 2 years after. Sometimes these programs, their effect wears off over time, and you see people employed immediately out of the program and not later, or vice versa. And also I like to look at wage levels, things like that. Now, there is, and it really depends on the study, but I mean, we've been using wage record data on some studies, and that's, in some ways, that's you miss some people, but at the same time, it's an objective source of information about earnings patterns after people leave the program, if you can get it, but it's very hard to get that data. You have to get it through the state or through the Department of Health and Human Services. So, I mean, that's kind of difficult. I think that's, to me, is kind of the most objective data out there that you can get, that you can match. And then sometimes the other thing we do is we use, you know, we use surveys where people are called at 6 months or a year afterwards, and you can have an independent person do the survey, or the agency. Now, the problem we've had with that is that we get pretty high rates of non-response. You almost have to, because people don't answer their phones and people move, and for a variety of other reasons, so it's very hard to get a response rate that's not, you know, that's over 50 or 60% that way, unless you're going to go out and track people down individually and do in-person interviews, then you can boost it. So it is a challenge, and this is you know, it's also the problem of things being self-reported as well.
Thank you very much, John, and I want to thank everybody on our panel: Maggie Cosgrove, Deborah Bragg, and John Trutko. And I want to thank all of you for calling in today. It's been an excellent and very rich and informative discussion. We've gotten a lot of questions. Actually, I'm sorry, as far as the specific questions, I'm sorry we didn't get to yours, but we can probably revisit this topic in the future if there's deep interest in it. We've gotten a lot of requests and questions about the availability of the PowerPoint and the recording and the white paper that Maggie and Deborah referenced. The recording and the PowerPoint will be up on the SharePoint site of Urban Institute probably within a week. And we're going to put the email address up. If you're not on SharePoint now, you can request information on how to access it at tacceval@urban.org. The white paper is not officially out yet, as I understand, and with the okay of the authors, we'll make it available to the TAACCCT evaluation community at that time. So again, we look forward to your participation in our webinars and our roundtables in the new year. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Randall.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
John Trickham.